I'm Mike Brofman, and you're watching Song and Wine Season 2, Episode 2. This is Brooklyn Art Song Society's little web series where we talk about our concerts and we imbibe ever so slightly. Or not very slightly, sometimes. Today I'm joined with the fantastic soprano, Laura Strickland.
Hello.
She is joining us on October 5th for our part 2 of our series, Clara, Robert, and Johannes. So that's Clara and Robert Schumann and Johannes Brahms. Part 2 is a really exciting concert. It is the complete songs of Clara Schumann, and then on top of that, a set of songs that was co-written by both Robert and Clara together, Opus 37 of Robert, and it's Opus 13 of Clara's, I believe. And then also we'll end with Robert Schumann's fantastic classic set from Lieben und Leben. But today our modus operandi is to talk a little bit about Clara and her songs, because now Laura is the grand champion of Clara, because she's literally doing well, you've probably done them all now, because you did the 3 that we're not doing, and then she's doing the 2 opus sets. So you've done them all.
Yeah, I did Opus 13, actually in Afghanistan, of all places. I was going to do some recitals there, and I wrote this Italian pianist who was like the only pianist in Kabul, and said, I would love to do a recital with you, and she wrote back, I would love to do a recital as well. I prefer female composers. We will be doing Clara Schumann. And I was like, I don't know any Clara Schumann. And she sent me this Opus 12, and you know, that was what introduced me to it. But sadly, I'm not doing Opus 12 on this concert.
But now you have the complete works.
Yeah, but now I have the complete works.
So, before we get started, cheers.
Cheers.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, I like it.
So my first question for you is, I always find, I do this a lot, I mean, a lot of how we program it, or how I program it, is sort of a lot of one composer, either on a concert over a series. Like last year we did Schubert the last year, so it was all of the songs and a lot of other works just from the last year. So so you get sort of a really intense, in a short time, a lot of music by the same composer, often from the very same period of time. And I find, at least for a lot of composers, I discover things about the composer that I feel like there was no other way, about their style, about sometimes who they are as people, almost, or at least as much as you can tell that through the music. So my question for you is, having sat with like so much of Clara Schumann's music at a relatively brief amount of time, what do you think are the elements of her style that you've become aware of, that you've appreciated or didn't appreciate?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, you know, having done a good deal of Schubert, having done a small bit of Schumann, I don't think that she's idiomatically, drastically different than the other composers of her day. And I think that she loves to throw in little surprises, and those are the measures that I you know, if I'm singing a strophic song and she treats it strophically, but you get to the 3rd verse and like the 2nd bar of the 3rd verse, she'll be like, oh wait, syncopation, and so she loves to kind of just turn things on their head, but she doesn't do it drastically or for very long. It's a moment of bliss within the structure that she set up.
That's a very like songy thing to do in general.
It is.
A song, often the great song was just like the one little teeny tiny moment, because that's usually poetry is all about, like the single turn of phrase, and that's how you translate that into
Well, and she was so familiar with the great composers of her day. Not only did she know them, she played their works, because she herself was an accomplished pianist. In fact, much more accomplished as a performer than as a composer, at least as far as...
Much more accomplished than Robert.
Yeah. And so, you know, I think that entire scene informed her own work. And it really wasn't until she married Robert that she was encouraged to compose. Her father really wanted her to be performing, because, you know, that was good for him. And Robert really, once they got married, and she was only like 21, he encouraged her to compose, and he championed her with publishers. And I would say that once he started to fall apart mentally, because she was only 36 when he died.
Yeah.
And then she had to support the family herself, and the best way to do that was performing, not composing.
Yeah.
So she kind of, you can kind of see how she goes through these spurts of productivity. But
that's why her output's relatively small.
yeah, and I mean, being a woman of her time, like she couldn't just say, peace out family
Yeah.
and home duties. Like, she had to really fit it in with all of those things she was doing.
And this is actually where, because the theme of this season is Clara Robert Johannes, this is where the Johannes part comes in a little bit, because when Robert had a mental breakdown and eventually died in an asylum, and Clara was widowed, Brahms was sort of, who they were always, good, as a circle, good friends, and Brahms sort of picked up the slack a little bit.
Yeah.
It's, he I think probably at some points helped her out financially, and always at least helped her out on a friendly level. And then where it gets hazy was there's sort of a sense that Brahms was in love with Clara, and probably Clara all respected Brahms and sort of platonically loved him back, but there's at least speculation that it was sort of an unrequited love on Brahms, and Brahms never married, and and I think Clara outlived Brahms. Clara lived for a long time.
Yeah, she lived for a long time. I think she died at 79.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she was without husband from age 39 to 70 something. That's kind of unheard of for the day, especially since she was so famous and so celebrated. She was sought after. She was beautiful. She was glamorous. And, I have no doubt that she had no lack of suitors. So it's interesting that she stayed single.
And there was a sense that probably part of it was a sort of loyalty to Robert, who was sort of her one true love.
Well, coming to the Robert thing, I mean, last spring when I did my last recital with Brooklyn Art Song Society, I did Robert Schumann's last 5 songs, which are the Gedichte de Maria Stuarda, which are these very traumatic, kind of turbulent texts on letters of English royal women who have been deposed or taken from power, and you can make the association between his own mental state and those of that is why those texts appeal to him, because he himself was about to lose everything and indeed go insane unto death. And so knowing that he was writing those while Clara is over here writing these.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just so interesting that she herself was able to find. I mean, most of her poetry she chooses is full of flowers and light and moons, and it's very romantic.
Hey, look at this flower song.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, and then and this is our spring song, and it's all rather upbeat. So one wonders, like, did she choose those because, well, those are just the popular poetry of the day, and she was catering to her audiences, because of course she did perform her own songs in her own concerts and hired singers to sing them. Or was this her attempt to bring, some sunshine into her own life?
Find levity where there probably was a lot in her.
Yeah.
Well, that actually brings us a good segue to my second question, which I feel like is the controversial question. But, it's a sincerely not loaded question. I always find it interesting, like, the idea of women composers. And first of all, the idea that you need to, like, title them a women, but that like, women composers are a type of composer. Like, there's German and there's French and there's woman.
And then there's women,
that seems like a relatively artificial, but I think the reason why people lump women together is because, especially in the 19th century in Europe, women were supposed to play a very different role in society, and it was probably just, considered at the very least not polite, if not appropriate, for them to be composers. I remember the story of Amy Beach, who was the great American female composer, and it was literally the rule of the house that her husband made was she was allowed to write 1 opus number and do 1 piano recital a year. And her husband made that rule, and she just said okay. Like, could you imagine, like, today?
Like my husband being like, "You can do 1 recital a month." I'd be like, ah.
Well, first of all, you just say no. You just say, like, I'm not gonna like make you dinner if you want me to.
Invalid.
Yeah, you'd just be like, go, you know, whatever, go screw yourself.
Yeah.
But like, on top of that, just that idea. But so my question is there anything that you notice about Clara's music that is somehow indicative of her being a quote unquote woman composer?
No, not at all. I mean, I think about this a lot because I do a lot of works by female composers. I seek them out. I do entire recitals of works by female composers like Libby Larsen, some really exciting new composers like Clarissa Saad, Amy Beth Kirsten. Oh gosh, the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
But like, you know, I'm constantly trying to disprove the myth. Like, there's absolutely no difference between a female composer and a male composer in the conception of their music or in their choice of poetry. I do think that, you know, women composers do tend to, at least nowadays specifically, go towards texts that have a relevancy towards women's issues, but I think that part of that is reactionary. And as a singer who is a woman, I appreciate it so much. Like, when I sing Libby Larsen's Queens, there is just something so deeply rooted within me. I relate to those women in a way that I don't think that if I was singing the words of Henry VIII, I would.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think that it's really important that you've got women doing that. But in Clara's case, you know, she was choosing the kind of poetry and the poets that every other male composer was setting.
Literally the same poem.
Like Die Stille Lotusblume. Like, who said it? Robert Schumann said it.
Robert Franz said it.
Robert Franz.
There's more. It's one of those songs.
Everybody said it.
Mother said it. There's probably like 50 anonymous, you know, like Carl Lowe and people like that. I'm sure.
And I think it turned out to be my favorite after having, you know, after having waded through the two opuses and kind of finding my special moments. You know, so, you know, she took this poem that everybody said that's so, you know, indicative of the times, of poetry at the time, of music at the time, what people were drawn to, and she really made a special thing of it and put her own stamp on it. But it's not because she's a woman; it's just because she herself is such a stunning musician. And
exactly. I think that I think a fair assessment in my mind is that there is no difference in great female composers. There's no difference in quality from great male composers. I think it's fair to say, and it's good that there is, like you kind of touched on, a difference in perspective and a difference in sometimes in emphasis, and a lot of times it's very refreshing for that exact reason. I don't think you would want a female composer to aspire to, like, I don't know, I mean maybe some would, and maybe somebody would want to write music that sort of when you listen to it you couldn't possibly tell that it was written by a woman. This is again in the realm of not quality, in the realm of sort of perspective, and but I think it's, you know, there have been enough white males who've had their voice heard that, you know, I don't see why you would want to just say what a white male could just say.
Well, I mean, I think that everyone has a voice. Like, I want to hear white male voices. I want to hear women's voices. I want to hear women's voices of every nationality, of every race. I mean, I think that the beautiful thing about song is that it allows us to express words in a way that you can't do when you just speak them or read them.
Yeah.
And you know, I talked to some poets this summer. I was at the Tanglewood Music Center this summer, and I said, you know, how do you feel about composers setting your words? Because they're taking something that you see as a complete art in and of itself and adding their thumbprint to it. And like, how does that make you feel? And I was surprised. Like, one person said, yeah, I guess it makes me feel a little uncomfortable, but I'm just glad that people are responding.
Yeah.
And one person was like, no, I think it's amazing to take a piece of art that I consider whole and to bring your full response to it. It means that you are interacting fully with what I have created, and there's something really important. It lends its own importance to what I've done, and it's validating in a way. And I found that to be very interesting.
Yeah, I think that. No, I like that. I like that. An idea of sort of like, I never thought of it this way, of setting music to poetry being like a complete commitment to the poem. It's like
It
the
is.
most thorough reading you can possibly
Mhm.
do of it is to think of how each word should be set to music.
Yeah.
And probably they're right that no one has read a poem more intimately or knows a poem better than someone who set it to music and had to like think about it on like every
level.
Yeah.
But like Goethe, he was famous for like hating that people set his poetry to music.
Yeah.
He
But you
to
also
his
have to
dying
think,
day.
like, yeah, and because he also was around like in the very inception when like art song, when when Schubert was writing art song, and just started it, it was a pretty radical thing. It was a radical thing musically, and just the idea that like, I think the general conception of music up until Schubert was music makes sense by itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like like the Bach, Mozart, string quartet. Like music is just about the relationship of and Schubert really broke that down in that no, there's something outside the music that the music's responding to, and that's why Schubert's the first composer to break all kinds of compositional rules like mixing of modes and modulating to keys you're not supposed to modulate to, because it didn't make any sense in the sort of strict sonata allegro analysis way, but it made perfect sense responding to a text.
Yeah.
And so it was and it was also just radical, and I think it's still a radical form in a lot of ways, in that it's just literally like someone communicating directly to an audience. With you I mean, you need a piano, and I guess a piano's kind of an expensive thing, but you need very, like, compared to a symphony orchestra, even compared to a string quartet, compared to almost any other medium, you need minimal amount of stuff.
Right.
You can literally do it in someone's living room.
Right, and I have several times.
Yeah.
And it's great.
And that idea that like music can just kind of be brought to people in a very
intimate,
and
informal or formal, depending.
or it just that you don't need a lot of resources
Mhm.
to create great art. That is, I think, beyond a musically radical idea, kind of like a
Socially radical.
socially radical idea.
Yeah,
that
music
people,
was always for like the rich people. Like you had the system of music support through the royals, through the wealthy. They had patrons, and you're breaking out of that system and giving it to the people and saying, "Do it in your living room."
Yeah, it was like and I think it tells like Haydn. The only way he could have an orchestra to play symphonies is if he was basically like a manservant to the Esterházys, and he literally was. Haydn famously had to wear the same outfit the butlers did when he worked for the Esterházys. He had to. He was considered a servant, and basically Schubert was like, I can just hang out in my house. I don't need anybody's support. I can do this totally. I can do what I think is beautiful and great, just sort of like in my with my buddies, who are not rich and powerful and connected. So yeah.
Actually, I got back from
Oh, yeah.
England, and I did the Wigmore Hall competition, and that competition requires a certain significant amount of Schubert, because they call Schubert the Shakespeare of song. Because he is the guy, like he's the one who...
He started it, he invented it.
He didn't invent it, but he certainly...
He made it what it was.
He made it what it was.
He made it, he brought it to its relevant state.
Yeah, I think so.
So I wanted to segue to our final question,
Okay.
which is a pretty simple question. What would you say are your favorite songs that, when you come on October 5th, you'll be most excited to hear?
I am very excited about Die Stille Lotusblume, as I refer to. It has a very surprising arc of drama, and it spoke to me from the moment I started singing it. And I think the last strophe is marked Ewig, and any time that like something is marked
that's Schumann's, Robert's favorite. Like this, I think in my set, the Opus 37. I think Claire wrote 3 songs, Robert wrote 9, and then the duets I think were kind of co-written. And literally, I think like 5 of the 12 songs are marked Ewig.
Ewig.
And it's such a great.
It's a great word.
It's a great German word. It's like it's one of those German words that like. It's like so. It's like German has that way of being like really abstract. It's just a thing that like the only word that can describe Ewig is Ewig. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like you need 17 English words to describe Ewig, and
it's just the thing. It's like you got it or you don't.
And
only German can kind of like convey that.
And I think it's a musical direction that I really enjoy exploring. So when I saw that on the paper, like, I can ask my pianist, I'm like, I keep saying, no, let's do it again, I'm not finding any here.
What Yiddish kind of means, I feel, is, well, because I played David's Boonler, which is Tom's, which is one of their, and a lot of David's Boonler Tom's are most Yiddish. That's one of the pieces that I've played for a long time. And, like, I think the thing about Yiddish is it means sort of, like, intimate, but it means not intimate, like, it means almost like, kind of like, make it your own.
Yeah, to use the common vernacular, make it your own. But to me, I think it means more than that. I think it means intimate, but it means an intimacy that you can share. It's a
better way of saying what I was trying to say. Yeah.
You know, it's a vulnerability, and I think that, like, going back to, like, talking about song in general, I think that's what's so fantastic about a song recital.
Yeah.
Is you are vulnerable, especially when you choose your own program from start to beginning. Your audience learns something about you.
Exactly.
Like, you choose those texts for a reason. You choose those composers and those moments for a reason. And so there's something very naked about that process.
No, I totally agree. Like, this is why I've always been drawn to song more than other. Like, I feel like in concertos and, like, solo piano repertoire, it's very hard to escape the sort of machismo, like, element of it.
The flourishes, the
fireworks.
fireworks.
The sort of cult of personality, kind of like big, like, just like the sheer, like, look, I can pull this off.
Yeah.
Even in music, like, I find Chopin's music is very intimate and personal, but it's just, maybe it's just the technical demands of it make it that there's some element of, like, look at me, gee whiz.
Yeah.
And in concertos, it's very, but there's no other type of music that's about being vulnerable and kind of feeling frail
and true to the text, and, like, really understanding the text, because the text means more than the narrative.
Yeah, there's no other form of music where you feel like every element of it is sort of secondary to another element, or is serving. That's a bad way of saying. Every element of it is serving another element. Everything's a little there's something selfless about it. Like, the composer is sort of serving the poet.
Yeah.
And the poetry is sort of serving the music, and the performer is serving
both
the music
of them.
and the text.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's not about, like, you know, impressing anyone. Like, no one comes out of an art song recital, like, thinking, like, how'd they do that?
Yeah.
No, that doesn't even enter it, like...
Well, sometimes it does, because, I mean, obviously you've got, you know, we wouldn't necessarily have called them art song at the time. You've got, you know, Rossini songs, you've got songs. The traditional song goes way back before art songs. So, you know, some of those Rossini songs are, like,
but almost those
arias.
are not. And there's sort of, I feel like there's song and then there's art song, and there's a slight difference. Like, it's sort of, I mean, it's a sort of, like, I think there's the tradition of Schubert's songs, and, like, and I think that if a song that someone considers an art song or is attempting to write an art song gets too florid and virtuosic, there's something about it that you just stop thinking of it as a song.
I can see that, but I will argue for you know, you still have an audience who wants to be entertained. So you have to explore the depths and heights and widths of all of the repertoire.
Yeah.
And, you know, you have to have vocal fire moments, you have to have, you know, very standard art song moments. I mean, just in the interest of keeping everyone, you know, engaged.
And to that end, I feel like art song is the only form of classical music, with the exception of maybe opera, but in a different way, that can actually be laugh out loud funny. Like, in a Haydn string quartet, there'll be, like, a little musical joke, and, like, the most it can possibly elicit is, like, a chuckle, like, ha ha ha, I didn't see that coming. Wah, wah,
unless it's like P.D.Q. Bach or something.
Yeah, unless it's like something but yeah, I think there really is there's a tradition in, I mean, certainly in Wolf, and I'm sure in Schumann, I think there's some kind of, like, in the Two Grenadiers song,
Well,
that's just, like, sort of, like,
ridiculous. Liszt is pretty showy sometimes.
Yeah, but but in terms of humor, there's just, like, this tradition of just kind of like jokes, like, that are, like, punchlines that are supposed to have a laugh at the end of them.
Sure.
And I don't think you get that in, like, a symphony. You get,
there's
moments of levity, certainly, in many symphonies, or moments of, like, not seriousness, but there's not, like, jokes.
Yeah.
The way that like you can, the way that like someone like Tom Chipulo can like make you laugh out
Make
loud.
you actually laugh, like a spontaneous comedic response.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, totally. Well, and so, okay, so coming back to the question, since, you know, we're obviously, but I think my second favorite song is a kind of a surprise. It's not one that probably stands out to most people. That's Sie liebten sich beide. German is not one of the languages I speak. Sie liebten sich beide. And the words are very simple. It's very short, and it's just basically like, they loved each other, they didn't know it, and they died not knowing it, but they died long before they actually died because they didn't know it, and their lives were, you know, like, not as full as they could have been had they known. And the music, it's very, you know, I'm a soprano, so we're known for wanting to, like, sing high, sing fast, sing bravura, but it's not, it's so still, and it doesn't even, the vocal line doesn't even resolve at the end, obviously, because that's, like, you know, the way the song goes. And interestingly, Clara did actually rewrite a version that did have the vocal line resolve, but this original version does not resolve. And it's just a wonderful little moment, and you feel the tears that she wrote into it, and I just, every time I sing it, I just kind of am struck by the drama of the situation.
Yeah.
And I think a good poem does that. You know, I mean, I want to say it's It's Heine. It's Heine.
And Heine's a good poet.
Heine's a good, Heine's a pretty good poet.
He's okay. I like poetry initially, though. I'm a fan. I'm not gonna
he's good. But I'm sure that she, like, read this poem and it was just kind of, like, struck by, because I think that someone, your reaction to words can be like, oh wow, this is an amazing little bitty poem, and just like, I'm gonna give it, like, everything I've got. And I think that she gave everything she had in a so subtle and understated way that's why I love it so much. She didn't need to overstate the drama of this situation, and
yeah, and in a certain way, I feel like things like that kind of relationship type stuff, like the long, like, I feel like this is another thing that only art song can capture, like that, like I feel like a symphony or like a concerto can capture like drama of the moment, but only art song can capture that kind of like the kind of bittersweetness of life.
Yep.
Like things are like probably, you know, the point of this poem, I don't know this poem that well, but it seems as though it's like, it's not like they were like miserable, ardently longing for someone they could never have. It's just like, there was just like a little like piece of them missing.
It's like a Craigslist misconnection, you know?
Yeah.
Exactly. All these people coming out with Craigslist songs now.
Yeah.
So this is like Clara's version.
This is a Craigslist leader.
This is like an early Craigslist leader.
Yeah. And it's just that sort of like subtle, like, and I feel like life actually, you know, that's why sometimes opera can fall flat on people, because it's life isn't about big dramatic over the top things. Life is actually about subtle, small, little things, and I feel like,
well, I think opera is trying really hard. I think it has been trying really hard for a very long time to you know, you have this term verismo, you know, the realness of life. So we've got La Boheme, where you're not showing, you know, you're showing street urchins. Oh, but you know. Opera tries, and and you know, it certainly has its place in documenting the history of music and the history of the human existence, as represented on stage. And but I you know, to me, like, for my heart, art song goes further, and the very fact there's just so much more repertoire in the art song genre than there is in opera. I mean, there is way more opera out there than is getting performed, which is a tragedy. You know, you've got the ABCs, the Aidas, the Bohems, the Carmens that keep getting performed all over the place. But you could literally do an art song recital every week, probably, of your life, and never touch the tip of the iceberg on what...
I know, it's really a vast... And that's why, I mean, I started this, I feel like the repertoire, I mean, like the first sentence of our little Brooklyn Art Song Society, like blurb is, we're dedicated to the vast repertoire of music, of poetry set to music.
Yeah.
And I think the key word of that is vast.
Yeah.
That, like, you know, when I started it, you know, because I'm kind of an overachiever,
Yes.
I had in my head what I wanted to do. You know, I kind of did the Walt Disney thing, where like Walt Disney like planned all the movies like long past his death. Like I have in my head.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy. Like all like he basically like he made this has nothing to do with art song, but he made this apparently he made this like video or movie that was in his will to the like people who were inheriting Disney to him, and he said like, this is the movie you're making this year, this is the movie you're making, and he did it all the way.
And did
like,
they do it?
Yeah, like 20 years past his death.
Wow.
And they followed it.
That's amazing.
And like he had it all in his head. Not that I'm comparing myself to.
You know, Mike Rothman, Walt Disney.
But I just when I started this, I knew, and I still do, kind of in my head, all the like projects that if there's money for, I will do.
Yeah.
And I kind of like, I got so far in advance, I was like, you know, why am I even thinking this? Is like, I'm not going to get to do this until like a decade in advance.
You could.
But I could. And just the fact that like, it's seemingly inexhaustible. Like, you can't run out of good repertoire. You can't. Like, I can't think of like, oh God, like, you know, I mean with...
You haven't even touched on a Scandinavian season.
I know, exactly.
You could do like 5 Scandinavian seasons, because no one ever does Scandinavian music, but it's gorgeous.
And there's some good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So yeah, that's I think what's special about the repertoire. Because the thing, and the reason why I think that repertoire, there's so much repertoire, is like, you know, you look at, like I remember when I was playing Hermit songs, I don't know why this one, but you look at, you know, composers put the date, like when things were written in, like first sonata they put like, you know, January to March,
yeah.
You know, whatever. And on most art songs, if you look at them, they write a single day. Like, I know, like I remember in Hermit songs, each song is written in one day.
Really?
Like, almost all of them, which is, and like, so, and I know for a fact, Schubert, they know when they studied it, Schubert wrote up to 4 songs a day.
Wow.
And like, often, they were 4 like great songs.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like, you know, just like stuff. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously some Schubert songs are just a page long, but that doesn't make them not.
It does not, yeah, quantity
And
does not.
And when I was a wee young one of my favorite things to do, because I was sad and lonely and an only child, was to like copy out scores. Like I copied out the entirety of Beethoven on like, I had like a little finale for kids type thing.
Had a finale for kids.
And I literally I just wrote out, I think it's because I didn't have the CD, I didn't know why it didn't occur to me, just like, I guess it was like before YouTube and Spotify. The only way I could hear, like, my piano teacher got me for my birthday one year the Beethoven complete piano concertos and full score.
I was gonna say score.
And I didn't know how they sounded, and I couldn't play them because I was like 10.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote out the score on what's it called?
On the
finale thing.
The kids' finale.
I wrote it out on kids' finale in its entirety so I could play it on MIDI.
Oh my god.
So I could hear it. That's
because
how,
you couldn't access recording?
I didn't just
You were 10, it didn't
occur to you.
That is commitment.
I didn't have any money. Yeah.
That's a real commitment.
And I just realized, but from doing that, I realized like, it took me like a week to write out the exposition of Beethoven's first piano concerto. And I remember I had to transpose a Schubert song, Wanderers Nachtlied 2, which is only a page long. And it took me 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. So physically, obviously you have to think of the music, but to physically write it out took 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And you can do that. And it's like, you know, it's like the greatest song ever written by a significant margin. So I think that's part of another, going back to kind of like, it's practical on the level you can do it in a very, very small audience, but it's also practical on the level of like, it doesn't, you know, you can sit down and write a song that like will move people for hundreds of years in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like
well,
incredible.
And he probably did, because I have to imagine that like, you know, even if the song was 5 pages long, that he had these melodies in his brain, and I'm sure he did any time amount of editing, but you know, the idea was there. Yeah. And it's kind of the bane of my existence that I'm not a composer myself, because I love the idea of just reading words and having that music flow out of you. And that's how I know that I am myself. I'm not a composer. Like, I truly think that composers are gifted with an extra sense that when they see these words on the page, they feel them in 15 different ways, and the music just has to come out and must exist.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe that's me over-romanticizing the composer's process.
But for song, it can be like that. It can be just... Actually, this is a funny story that you reminded me of it. Lola Lieberman, you're also singing at a Lola Lieberman's concert, which is in March, and you should come to that too.
Yes.
But I remember Lola Lieberman, he requested, and it's fine, it's great, that he wanted to set these us to do these Robert Franz songs. Robert Franz is a contemporary of Schumann and Brahms, whose
name wasn't quite as...
He didn't quite make it into the canon, but he has some good stuff, and I was playing this song by him called Die Lotusblaum. And I didn't put two and two together that this was the same Die Lotusblaum that Clara set and Robert set. Robert Die Lotusblaum actually is from the set Märchen, which is happening on November 17th. You should come to that concert too.
November 17th.
Yeah, but he said that's literally my favorite song. The Robert Schumann setting of Die Lotusblaum.
Okay.
If I could pick one song.
Do you know the Clara Schumann one?
I will hear. I mean, I've heard all of it. I did this, but I don't know it as intimately. So, and I remember so I was playing the song and I looked at the words and I didn't put two and two together that it was the same song. It's a Heine text. And so I was like, where do I know these words? These words seem really familiar. And I just started reading the words without and I read it. In the melody,
no,
I read it, and when I was reading, I was like, dum bum bum ba da da dum, dum ba dum bum bum bum. I just read it in that melody, it was so, there was no other melody in my mind that could possibly be associated with these words. It was like the most perfect melody. It was like somehow, and I just had that moment. Even though obviously I didn't come up with it myself, but I had something that vaguely approximated that moment when a singer reads a text and just has the melody that has to go to that.
Obviously. So wait, so you've been asking the questions, but now, you're performing on this concert as well, and you're doing Clara Schumann songs as well. What is your favorite?
Actually, I decided, there's a song, and the German's going to escape me, but it's the first Clara song on the set.
Of the...
Grab my book.
Opus 12? No, Opus 12, right?
It's Opus 37, it's the Robert.
Oh, okay, then I can't help you.
It's the first one of the three in Opus 12.
We're gonna make a mess.
We're gonna make a mess.
Okay.
This is happening. I played it as an anthem this morning at my church gig, so
that's sweet.
This is my thing.
Okay.
It is.
Actually, I wanted you to say, I was fishing for Liebst du Schönheit.
That's what it is. It's I think it's a perfect song.
It is a perfect song.
It is truly an exquisite song.
I completely agree. I'm having done, it's Opus 12 actually, but having done.
I was wrong. I said Opus 13. Mea culpa.
But having done it. Now because you asked me to this concert, having done 12, 13, and 23, I still think Liebst du Schönheit stands out as a true pearl of.
It's not just one of the Clara's greatest songs. It's one of the greatest songs.
And everyone keeps saying, "Oh, the Mahler Liebst du." I'm like, no, back up. It's the Clara.
I remember actually, because I've had some wine now. I remember the first time I read this song. I got to him I'm playing this at my wedding. I don't know who I'm marrying. I don't have a girlfriend. But I'm playing this, this is
I'll sing it. How about I sing, you play?
This is on camera and we're shaking hands right now.
I'm going to sing Liebst du Schönheit at your wedding.
And I'm playing.
Mazel tov to the lucky woman.
Alright, before I pour more wine, I'm actually going to stop. Because I need to be in somewhat of a good state to tell you about this awesome concert you totally have to come to.
You should totally come.
October 5th, which is a Saturday, at Old Stone House, which is in Park Slope. It's in the middle of a park on 3rd Street and 5th Avenue. It's a really special little concert space that actually is a building that was maintained exactly as it was during the Revolutionary War, because it was where the Battle of Brooklyn was fought. And so that's why they kept it that way.
That's awesome.
Now you know.
I can't wait.
Yeah, it's a really cool space. The program is Clara's completely, which is Opus 13 and 23, and then Clara and Robert Schumann, the 12 songs, Opus 37, which is Robert's Opus number. The 3 songs that Clara wrote were published separately as Opus 12. And The final piece of the program is Robert Schumann's From Leben und Leben, which is like...
You know, little thing you might have heard of.
one of the great... I mean, if you can get past the, like, kind of old-fashionedness of it. But musically is one of the great song cycles of all time. And Laura will be on this concert.
Yep.
The fabulous mezzo Kate Maroney will be doing Frauenlieben and the songs for female in my set. And David Williams, who's a fantastic baritone, will be doing the couple songs in my set that are actually for male voice. The pianists are myself and Yoi Sugiyama, who is a fantastic pianist, and Spencer Meyer is doing Frauenlieben und Leben, and he is out of this world good, and we're really excited to have him. So it's October 5th. Don't miss it. It's you can buy tickets at brownpapertickets.com, or you can check out our website www.brooklynartssongsociety.org. You can like us on Twitter. Or follow us on Twitter, whatever you do. Whatever you can,
like us on Twitter and you follow us. No,
you
you follow us on Twitter and you like us.
You follow on Twitter at Brooklyn Arts Song, and you can like us on Facebook. It's Brooklyn Arts Song Society. You should look us up. So now that we've drank a lot of wine, we're going to see you next time when we talk about Märchen with Niels Newbert. Thanks so much for watching. Cheers.
Cheers.